George.
Hey, good morning, Phil. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. It's good to see you. And hello, everybody. This is Saturday Morning with George and Phil. 22 minutes to help you become the best version of yourself. Whether you found yourself out of shape, struggling in a dead-end job, or maybe job transition. We are your hosts, George Murray, Phil Connor, to help you move from where you are today to where you want to be tomorrow. We're glad you can meet us early on a Saturday morning. And we do encourage your questions, so please put them in the chat, and we'll try to answer as many as time will allow. Today, George, we're talking about connecting with others.
Yes, before we start, I want to turn around and thank the folks at Thrivent, if I can get my technology to work. So the guys at Thrivent have been reimagining financial services for individuals and communities. So the folks like Skip Nelson, who's been on pitch hitting for us before on shows, has been helping people in career transition for well over 10 years. And the folks, and as I told people in the book, we should be always looking at our finances, I think. But what I found in my first career transition is if I did it a lot sooner, I could have understood my roadway and how long I actually had, whether I had a month or I had 10 months in order for me to land and not worry about my finances. So if you guys are interested, and I strongly suggest, you can take your phone and you can scan over that and get 1 hour of free consultation. Believe me, it's more than worth it to reach out to Skip Nelson, Brad Markwell, as the folks over there at Thrivent. So.
No, thank you, folks at Thrivent. George, as we talk about connecting with others today, and I know we're going to talk about networking in a couple minutes, but do you remember the first time that truly connecting with somebody, where you were, who it was?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it was back early on, just before my career transition, kind of my first one officially started. I didn't know even actually how to talk about or spell networking, let alone do it. And I had just reached out to my banker at that time. I was working and running an international company. And he said, hey, why don't you let's grab a coffee and let's just kind of talk about your situation, et cetera, and see how I may be able to help you that. And of course, that was Matt Thompson at US Bank here in Minnesota.
Oh, that's an awesome story. How about your first official networking meeting where you really connected with someone that you hadn't met before and maybe still have a relationship with today?
Well, it's actually kind of like just a spin-off of what, Matt Thompson and I were actually having coffee at this Lund's Barley's down in Wayzata, which, by the way, is no longer there. And we were talking about this current situation. And here comes Greg Rye, and Greg Rye was on one of our previous shows. And he said, hey, you know what? You really need to talk to Greg. He's had the experience with talking with so many people in career transition, willing to help. And, as I kind of talk about it, I just learned early on a lot from Greg Rye: energy, enthusiasm, positive attitude. It was all him. When he came over and really energized, hey, how can I help you? Here's my business card. Let's set some time up. And that's kind of how it just kind of started. It's really somebody who I was really originally connected to. And it just kind of sprung out to well over, I think, in the past 5 or 6 years, well over almost 2,000 people that I've connected with and talked with.
I imagine and I know Greg, and I've had a similar experience with Greg, but for you, how did it feel? Like a pretty good feeling to meet someone that was so interested in you and what you were going through and being so generous with their time?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great lesson for me early on. Like meeting people and learning about their backgrounds, but so often I found myself focused on what I wanted to accomplish and not really much about the other person. And what I learned from Greg was, and I actually state this a lot of times in speaking, et cetera, is that, George, if there's one thing that you're going to learn from me, the more you give, the more you get. And I kind of converted that in my process of networking, where how can I help this person? And when I started to do that and genuinely interested in those individuals, and developing a relationship over a period of time, not just a one and done introduction. That's where a lot of opportunities thrived. I mean, I talk about personal board of advisors. All my people on the personal board of advisors, all people I learned in career transition, and I would have never had the experience if I was, fully engaged in an opportunity. And so I tell people all the time, it's really important for you, even beyond your career transition, is to network with those folks ongoing, whether it's 2 or 3 times a year, just, either virtually or just as an update.
Well, and as Harvey Mackay always says, you want to dig your well before you're thirsty. And I know in talking to you, you believe in that. And you said that how grateful you were that you would help other people, but then it would reciprocate. And even, landing recently in a new opportunity, you said you owed a lot of that exposure to that opportunity to the networking you had done for years.
Yes, it's Harvey Mackay wrote that book. I think it's back in '92, maybe it was even sooner. And that was a prelude of what networking was all about, right? It's so true that you have to develop relationships over a period of time. You can't just go and expect somebody to give you something without not knowing what you need, knowing what your ask is, and then more importantly, how you guys can mutually benefit from one another over a period of time.
Well, and you've talked about the fact that you found that not just helping other people, but by helping other people, it's actually helped you develop. You want to maybe share a little bit about that?
Yeah, to me, I think what I learned early on with, knowing and getting introduced to a lot of great Uber networkers, I call them, people who just go out of their way to help, is that what I experienced and learned from them just talking to them is that they went into every particular situation as to how they could help you. I mean, like we talk about, the Uber networkers here in Minnesota, Jenny Jeffords, she always starts a conversation. How can I help you? Lenny Newman's the same thing. What are you looking for? How can I be of service to you? And I think if you really go into any kind of initial networking meeting like that, you're going to benefit because you're going to learn more from. I always tell people the first meeting should be broken up 70-30. 70% of the time, you should generally go in and try to understand this person, get some background on, what college did they go to? You could do that the night before with homework and go into LinkedIn. But, what classes did you like? One of the gentlemen that I started to talk with, I just got introduced through a common connection. And we talked the first 20 minutes about how his daughters went through, college on swim scholarships. And at the time, my daughter was just starting swimming, right? So that's the first 20 minutes we talked about. And since then, I want to say that we probably introduced each other to well over 3 dozen professionals.
Oh, that's fantastic. Connection is something that's so important and really the focus of what we're talking about today. But you and I both have a friend that now lives a fair distance from us, joining us for Coffee with George and Phil. Let's welcome our special guest coming from London, England today, Stacy. She's a business and performance coach. Welcome to Coffee with George and Phil, Stacy.
Well, good morning, George and Phil. Thank you for having me while I drink my tea, my afternoon tea.
Well, it's great that you could join us. What kind of obstacles do you see in your business that professionals need to overcome?
As far as connecting with others, wow. I would say, remembering that connecting with others is just vital to our humanism, right? Like as people, we need to connect with other people. And so sometimes we get hung up in just that, getting out of that, the way that, connecting with others is a great way to learn about somebody else, to, get out of your own head, to offer value in a way that you would have never expected. So going in without any assumptions.
Well, and you've shared with me that our personal lives and professional lives often blur together.
Yeah.
When a client comes to you that is struggling to make the right connections or maybe even make connections at all, what do you typically propose that they do?
So two things. One, I got from an old mentor who really introduced me to the power of networking in 2004. And you may know him. He's local to Minneapolis. His name's Tony Rotundi. I don't know if either of you know him, right?
Who
Great
doesn't
guy.
know Tony? He is like the messiah of career transition. He's been doing that for
Yes.
almost 35 plus years.
So generous
Yeah.
with his time.
He is exceptionally generous. And so one of the things that he taught me was every Friday, spend 15 minutes reaching out to 3 people you know, asking for 20 minutes of their time, and just saying that you'd like to reconnect, and going into it with the thought that you may not hear back from them for a month, maybe even 6 months, but as soon as you start, it's like the trickle effect, if you will. As soon as you start putting the feelers out there, things start to happen. And so I have learned from him and have gone back to that many times, as far as, if you're struggling to get out there, you have to put yourself out there. And the next is, often we forget about leveraging people that are really so close to us. So, really good friends, if you have any like neighborhood networking, people that you tend to connect with and talk about, that know about you, that maybe understand your passions a little bit more. In fact, I have a client who is not only starting her business, but going through a career transition. She wants to do both. And the other day I said to her, who have you told in your, your own personal friend network about what you're doing? And she's like, no one. She called her best friend that night. And the next day, her best friend's husband said, hey, I found a global director position for you. Would you be interested? And I said, see, there you go. People are going to go in with the assumption that they will talk about you likely, then they will talk about you likely better than you will talk about yourself. So leverage.
They have a vested interest in helping you, right? They're already
Absolutely.
friends with you.
Absolutely. They know your strengths. Sometimes the things that you forget, they want to see you happy. They want to see you thrive. So people love to give. And when we don't ask for help, yet we're willing to help, we take that gift that other people get, we take that away from them.
Yeah, but what's also important is to make sure you have a clear ask. A lot of times, especially if you're new to networking, a lot of people tend to not know a clear ask. And that's what's frustrating in that networking meeting, initial one, is that you get towards the end and you finish off with, how can I help you? And the other individual who's maybe employed or maybe an influential person that can help you get to your next opportunity, a lot of people don't have that clear ask.
Yeah. And I would say that that's true. And I did a lot of, when I was in my corporate career, a lot of mentoring young college grads. And that's often what we would bump up against. They weren't quite familiar with what networking really meant and how to ask. So in those positions, I would actually have them go back and do a little bit of work, especially if they had already been in a position for, a year or two and wanted to do something else.
So we have one of our viewers actually have a question. She's asking, what tips do you have to start the conversation to ask for networking meetings? Most of us have quite a few connections on social media, but they may not be deep connections.
So one thing that I do, especially when I meet new people, I actually leave a video. So I leave a video and I say hello. And once we get past that, and if they respond, I will actually say, I'm really interested in X. So something specific on their LinkedIn profile. Would you be interested in a 20-minute conversation? I'd love to learn how we can help each other. And yeah.
But I do something similar is trying to find something I want to learn about that person, being curious about their background, their experience. Because in a lot of ways, I think I think the way a lot of us are wired, especially folks that tend to be those high performing, high potential executives, we get ingrained in us to be goal oriented. and to go after the target, go after whatever the item is that we want to achieve. And the reality is, I think in humanity in general, but definitely in leadership, the people that I've often looked up to, and I would love your insight on this, Stacey, if you would agree with the executives you interact with, is that the leaders that truly excel are the ones that have a knack for connecting with people.
They understand the importance of it. In fact, they will make time. They will make that 20 minutes, they'll make it a priority to connect. And most likely they know what it took to get to where they are, and they didn't go about it in a vacuum.
It looks like Rob Sinks, a viewer this morning, saying, any suggestions on how to network only for networking's sake? I'm not in transition, not looking to change, but I have the feeling that those I try to connect with and begin to build a relationship will think I'm looking for my next job or that I want something. But I feel there's a barrier there that I need to help break down to actually have the relationship with new people.
It's common for people to assume that they would be a bother. So you get a little bit in your own head as part of it. But if your intent is really to network for networking's sake, think of it in terms of you are offering value to the world, to somebody else. I'd love to network. I continue to grow. I love helping people. What is it that's fueling you to network? And go to your heart. Don't get caught in the assumption of what other people, or your assumption of what other people might think you are doing. People will respond or they won't. If they're interested, they'll respond and you get to meet.
There's an author, Larry Kaufman, that wrote the NCG Factor, and I love what his mission is to always introduce two people to the person that he meets. So he's really focused on identifying what does this person have, or what's their experience, and who can I find that'll complement this person that I could introduce them to. So it starts immediately is that he's looking for a way to give or to help the person he meets. And that might be a great way to approach it as well. George, we have another question.
Yeah, so Rodney Round is asking, how can you provide some examples of a clear ask?
Clear
you don't
ask.
Want to answer it? I can answer it because I've kind of become an expert on this.
You teed that up, yeah.
Yeah, I always kind of, my approach, and this really actually comes from, you had talked about Tony Rotundi. You know, I met Tony the first time, and he's definitely one that sees things out of the box. And when I asked him, I said, you know, Tony, you know, we talked about it in network, and he asked me, he says, well, George, what are you looking for? And of course, new to networking, I didn't have a clear ask. And his response was, well, you know, it has to be defined, but not too defined, and a little bit vague, but not too vague. And I was just like, well, what does that mean? And I went home after a couple of days and I started toil over it, and I kind of converted it to 2 swim lanes, right? An ideal swim lane, first of all, is here's my ideal opportunity, right? And, you know, I kind of clearly identify it in a very short and concise way. Hey, I'm looking for a chief operating officer between a company between 50 and 250 million in manufacturing technology. Because a lot of those opportunities are really never going to be posted. And if they are, there's already probably a slew of candidates that are identified. So it's really important to get out there. And I would say 5% of the time, the folks there said, hey, you know what? I do know somebody, you know, and they can introduce you. But if you don't ask, you're not going to know. And then, you know, if you got it tiered off towards a conversation and, you know, they're kind of like, well, searching for something, then I'd always kind of switch gears. And I said, well, my second swim lane is I'm looking to network with these types of folks, right? And it was always people that potentially could be an influencer or a hiring manager. So for me, I'm looking to network with CEOs and board members. And I'm also looking to network with private equity firms, because those are the people that might potentially look for somebody like me. Mm-hmm. So if you're a salesperson, you're a sales manager, you're looking to network with VPs of sales and directors of sales, et cetera.
And touching on what the earlier person asked, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be that you're looking for a job. You could be meeting people with similar experiences that you just want to build your professional network, because you never know when you can help each other. You know, one thing that I've realized, and even when I got a chance to meet Stacy many months ago, is that the world is crazy small. And when you start to get to know people's backgrounds and their experiences, it's amazing. I live outside of the Twin Cities and Minnesota, and was talking to a colleague that lived in Rochester, Minnesota, about an hour southeast of Minneapolis. And I have a relative that lives in a town called Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, outside of Harrisburg. His son had just moved to that town. And it's just like, how does that happen? This world is so, and even, finding people in the UK, halfway across the world that you have common history with. So it's amazing when you start to really develop a curiosity and learn about people, what you can learn. And I think, to me, that's the treasure in getting to know people is the things you can learn and the experiences you can be exposed to.
Hey, Stacy, I have a question for you. Now, you've lived in Minnesota and London. Are the concepts different depending on where you live?
As far as connecting goes?
Right.
I mean, one of the reasons I'm here is because I actually was getting better traction connecting with people in the UK when I was laid off in November of 2019 and decided to go into my coaching business full time. I wasn't getting a lot of traction in Minnesota, and I had a pretty big network. And I don't know if it was just the climate at the time, and there were so many layoffs happening just in the Twin Cities area. It could be a number of things. And then obviously COVID hit. But the reason that I'm here is because I was able to start connecting and having conversations with people here, business owners and executives, and just other individuals, coaches like me in the UK. So I don't know if the concepts are necessarily different. I do know that I have made many more contacts much more quickly and have had more conversations here than I have in the US. So it could be just my own market saturation, if you will, and or just the type of business and what I'm doing.
Well, it sounds like that both the opportunity for you to learn and meet people with different backgrounds, and for them to learn about your background being different than what their experience is, probably is adding to it. Sometimes when we're right in our own backyard, we just assume everybody has the same life experience, everybody has the same knowledge set. But when you can move yourself out of your comfort zone into a new setting, you can really expand that circle of influence. Is that similar to what you've experienced?
Yeah. In fact, I have to admit, I led global teams for 15 years. So I worked with people that in our offices in Dublin and Dubai and Kilkenny, and then all time zones in the US. And being here is definitely different, right? You're immersed in their culture, and here they very much have a work to live mindset. People automatically get 26 days of vacation a year. So I think, we were talking behind the scenes where people take 2 weeks off and there's no contact. Now, from the business side, there's still the same issues. I don't want to diminish that. The issues are very similar to what they are in the US. It's time, money, effort, right resources, et cetera. But definitely much more of the work to live environment here than the live to work.
Well, we're going to run over a little bit, but I think this topic is so instrumental on so many levels, not just finding a job, not just, if you're in a job that you're looking, you can find potential clients, opportunities, just making sure you have a solid understanding of connecting with others. Yeah. Rodney Brown has another question. Is there a protocol for introducing others? Do you ask for the others first? Do you tell the people or the person to go connect with the other person, or do you make the introduction yourself?
Stacy, do you want to start if you're bringing some people together, what you do?
So this is what I actually learned from Tony. I do my best to remember at the end of every connection, every networking call, if there's somebody that I think that you would be of interest or that might be of interest in connecting with, would it be okay if I made an introduction? So I ask for permission. And or similarly, I may even also ask, and I think you maybe touched on this, if there are other people that you think of that might be interested in connecting with me, please feel free. That said, I always ask when I think of somebody, I always say, hey, there's a couple people I have in mind. Let me check with them first before I make the introduction. Is that okay with you?
Well, I think that's incredibly courteous. Plus, it also primes the pump a little bit to make sure that they'll be engaged when they do connect.
Yeah.
How about you, George? Any recommendations?
Yeah, I think those are spot on. Always respecting, because of the fact that even unless you don't know them personally, like Lenny and I kind of basically tennis match a lot of folks back and forth with one another and helping people expand their networks. It's really trying to respect their time, especially if they're currently working and they've got a full life. You want to respect their time and ask for permission before you do that introduction. So I think that's a great top point.
And the only thing I would add to what you both said was that if you're the one being introduced and you really want to meet this other person, just be patient, because the urgency in your life to meet somebody doesn't always necessarily match the pace of life that they're going through. And it's happened to me where I've been introduced to somebody, but I've been traveling with work or just had a really hectic week, and I couldn't get back as much as I usually try to respond within 24 hours when I am introduced to someone. But life gets busy sometimes. So if you're the one that's waiting for that, reciprocal response, just be patient. Give it a week or two. Don't fret on the fact that the person doesn't respond right away, because there's a lot of things going on in each other's lives. But speaking of which, before our viewers' Saturdays get busy, Stacy, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
It was fun to see you guys. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you. Thanks for jumping across the pond for a few minutes.
And we hope you join us again with Coffee with George and Phil sometime in the future.
Absolutely.
George, this is a topic like you had mentioned we could talk about for hours, and it's so important. I think it's the way human beings are wired that we connect with people and find ways to have relationships. But thanks so much to Stacy for joining. If you wanted to hear more from Stacy or connect with her information's on the screen. Incredibly talented consultant helping executives, and when you reach out to her, you don't have to be an executive, but mention Coffee with George and Phil when you do.
So yeah, time goes by fast, but I want to talk to you guys about that next session, August 7th. We've got a really great special guest. We actually alluded to that individual throughout the show this time. So you might be able to pick up who might be able to drop by on the 7th of August, but we're going to be talking about a passion project. Writing a book, how do I get started? What are the obstacles? This is all things that I had to learn, kind of like just careers transition myself. It was an ongoing process. And just because you think you've written a draft, you're halfway there, you're not. And our guests will make sure that you guys have a clear passion, because I too believe that everybody has at least one book in them. And it could be a passion. If you had told me 5 years ago that I'd be writing a book about career transition, I would have said you're crazy. So,
that's going to be a great episode. And then, we've got George's award-winning book, Hired. We've talked a little bit in the past about this book, and I can't stress enough the fact that this is, don't take my word for it. If you go on Amazon, you'll see now there's over 80 reviews. It's a large enough sample that you can kind of get a sense of how the book's been impactful for people. Today, it's available on Barnes & Noble. It's available on Amazon. Really, maybe the quickest way to get it is directly from the publisher at Kirkhouse. But if you can't wait for a physical copy and you need to have that electronic copy in your hands right away, you can go on Kindle Unlimited. But the key to remember is if if you know someone or you want to get hired, you need to buy a copy of Hired.
And for our viewers, if you guys are interested in looking at previous shows and previous topics, you can go to my profile and go under the author section of my particular job for Hired, and all the previous shows are there. And you can also take a look at it. We are streaming from YouTube Live as well, and there's another opportunity there. But hey, Phil, definitely ran over, but I just love this topic, connecting. You know, it's one of the things that we continue ongoingly to perfect and improve on. So, hey,
George,
have a great Saturday.
George, before we sign off real quickly, to that vein, we also have a transformation community using the WhatsApp app. If any of the folks watching today are interested, it's just a way that as a community, we come together to keep you motivated, to listen, to get some daily tips to help you in all different facets of life. You know, whether it's career transition, interviewing, starting a workout program, just contact either one of us, message us. We'd love to have you in the community and just constantly working to get better and achieve forward.
Yeah, over this past year, you know, this post-pandemic, we've had people lose double-digit weight. We've had people land opportunities faster just by helping them, prompting them, giving best advice, giving tips. It's a community that continues to grow.
We'll see you on the 7th with Coffee and George. Coffee.